The following was recorded by JohnLothe and is intended for educational purposes. This recording is not to be sold or distributed for sale. If you wish to support the work and publishing of these recordings, please visit the JohnLothe Patreon page. If you come across these recordings anywhere else without my expressed support, and find that they are requesting donations for presenting this work to you, you will not be supporting the creator by doing so. This is just a friendly warning to anyone who may fall prey to predatory practices I have come across recently. Between Two Ages: America's Role in the Technotronic Era by Zbigniew Brzezinski. Part 2. The Ambivalent Disseminator. The United States is the principal global disseminator of the technotronic revolution. It is American society that is currently having the greatest impact on all other societies, prompting a far-reaching cumulative transformation in their outlook and mores. At various stages in history, different societies have served as a catalyst for change by stimulating imitation and adaptation in others. What in the remote past Athens and Rome were to the Mediterranean world, or China to much of Asia, France has more recently been to Europe. French letters, arts, and political ideas exercised a magnetic attraction, and the French Revolution was perhaps the single most powerful stimulant to the rise of populist nationalisms during the 19th century. In spite of its domestic tensions, indeed, in some respects because of them, see Part 4, the United States is the innovative and creative society of today. It is also a major disruptive influence on the world scene. In fact, communism, which many Americans see as the principal cause of unrest, primarily capitalizes on frustrations and aspirations, whose major source is the American impact on the rest of the world. The United States is the focus of global attention, emulation, envy, admiration, and animosity. No other society evokes feelings of such intensity. No other society's internal affairs, including America's racial and urban violence, are scrutinized with such attention. No other society's politics are followed with such avid interest. So much so that to many foreign nationals, United States domestic politics have become an essential extension of their own. No other society so massively disseminates its own way of life and its values by means of movies, television, multi-million copy foreign editions of its national magazines, or simply by its products. No other society is the object of such contradictory assessments. The American Impact. Initially, the impact of America on the world was largely idealistic. America was associated with freedom. Later, the influence became more materialistic. America was seen as the land of opportunity, crassly defined in terms of dollars. Today, similar material advantages can be sought elsewhere at lower personal risk, and the assassinations of the Kennedys and of Martin Luther King, as well as racial and social tensions, not to speak of Vietnam, have somewhat tarnished America's identification with freedom. Instead, America's influence is in the first instance scientific and technological, and it is a function of the scientific, technological, and educational lead of the United States. Scientific and technological development is a dynamic process. It depends, in the first instance, on the resources committed to it, the personnel available for it, the educational base that supports it, and, last but not least, the freedom of scientific innovation. In all four respects, the American position is advantageous. Contemporary America spends more on science and devotes greater resources to research than any other society. In addition, the American people enjoy access to education on a scale greater than that of most other advanced societies. See Table 4 and 5. At the beginning of the 1960s, the United States had more than 66% of its 15 to 19 age group enrolled in educational institutions. Comparable figures for France and West Germany were about 31% and 20%, respectively. The combined populations of France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom are equal to that of the United States, roughly 200 million. But in the United States, 43% of college-age people are actually enrolled, whereas only 7 to 15% are enrolled in the four countries, Italy having the low figure and France the high. The Soviet percentage was approximately half that of the American. In actual numbers, there are close to 7 million college students in the United States, and only about 1.5 million in the four European countries. At the more advanced level of the 20 to 24 age bracket, the American figure was 12%, while that for West Germany, the top Western European country, was about 5%. For the 5 to 19 age bracket, the American and the Western European levels were roughly even, about 80%, and the Soviet Union trailed with 57%. As a result, the United States possesses a pyramid of educated social talent, whose wide base is capable of providing effective support to the leading and creative apex. This is true even though in many respects American education is often intellectually deficient, especially in comparison with the more rigorous standards of Western European and Japanese secondary institutions. Nonetheless, the broad base of relatively trained people enables rapid adaptation, development, and social application of scientific innovation or discovery. While no precise estimates are possible, some experts have suggested that a present-day society would experience difficulties in rapid modernization if less than 10% of its population in the appropriate age bracket had higher education and less than 30% had lower education. Moreover, both the organizational structure and the intellectual atmosphere in the American scientific world favor experimentation and rapid social adaptation. In a special report on American scientific policies, submitted in early 1968, a group of experts connected with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development concluded that America's scientific and technical expertise is deeply rooted in American tradition and history. Competitiveness and the emphasis on quick exploitation have resulted in a quick spin-off of the enormous defense and space research efforts into the economy as a whole, in contrast to the situation in the Soviet Union, where the economic byproducts of almost as large scale a research effort have so far been negligible. It is noteworthy that the Russians themselves estimate that the productivity of their researchers is only about half the Americans, and that innovations take 2 or 3 times as long to be put into effect. This climate and the concomitant rewards for creative attainments result in a magnetic pool, the brain drain, from which America clearly benefits. America offers, to many trained scientists, even from advanced countries, not only greater material rewards, but a unique opportunity for the maximum fulfillment of their talents. In the past, Western writers and artists gravitated primarily toward Paris. More recently, the Soviet Union and China have exercised some ideological attraction, but in neither case did it involve the movement of significant percentages of scientific elites. Though immigrating scientists initially think of America as a platform for creative work, and not as a national society to which they are transferring political allegiance, in most cases that allegiance is later obtained through assimilation. America's professional attraction for the global scientific elite is without historic precedent in either scale or scope, though this attraction is likely to decline for Europeans, particularly because of America's domestic problems and partially because of Europe's own scientific advance. The success of J.J. Servan Schreiber's book, The American Challenge, reflects the basic inclination of concerned Europeans to accept the argument that the United States comes closest to being the only truly modern society in terms of the organization and scale of its economic market, business administration, research and development, and education. In contrast, the structure of American government is viewed as strikingly antiquated. European sensitivity in this area is conditioned not only by fear of a widening American technological lead, but very much by the increasing presence on the European markets of large American firms that exploit their economic advantages of scale and superior organization to gradually acquire controlling interests in key frontier industries. The presence of these firms, the emergence under their aegis of something akin to a new international corporate elite, the stimulation given by their presence to the adoption of American business practices and training, the deepening awareness that the so-called technological gap is, in reality, also a management and education gap. All have contributed both to a positive appraisal of American technostructure by the European business and scientific elite, and to the desire to adapt some of America's experience. Less tangible, but no less pervasive, is the American impact on mass culture, youth mores, and lifestyles. The higher the level of per capita income in a country, the more applicable seems the term Americanization. This indicates that the external forms of characteristic contemporary American behavior are not so much culturally determined as they are an expression of a certain level of urban, technical, and economic development. Nonetheless, to the extent that these forms were first applied in America and then exported abroad, they became symbolic of the American impact and of the innovation-emulation relationship prevailing between America and the rest of the world. What makes America unique in our time is that confrontation with the new is part of the daily American experience. For better or for worse, the rest of the world learns what is in store for it by observing what happens in the United States, whether it be the latest scientific discoveries in space and medicine, or the electric toothbrush in the bathroom, pop art or LSD, air conditioning or air pollution, old age problems or juvenile delinquency. The evidence is more elusive in such matters as style, music, values, and social mores. But there, too, the term Americanization obviously implies a specific source. Similarly, foreign students returning from American universities have prompted an organizational and intellectual revolution in the academic life of their countries. Changes in the academic life of Germany, the United Kingdom, Japan, and more recently, France, and to an even greater extent in the less developed countries, can be traced to the influence of American educational institutions. Given developments in modern communications, it is only a matter of time before students at Columbia University and, say, the University of Tehran will be watching the same lecturer simultaneously. This is all more than likely because American society, more than any other, communicates with the entire globe. Roughly 65% of all world communications originates in this country. Moreover, the United States has been most active in the promotion of a global communications system by means of satellites, and it is pioneering the development of a worldwide information grid. It is expected that such a grid will come into being by about 1975. For the first time in history, the cumulative knowledge of mankind will be made accessible on a global scale, and it will be almost instantaneously available in response to demand. New imperialism. All of these factors make for a novel relationship between the United States and the world. There are imperial overtones to it, and yet in its essence, the relationship is quite different from the traditional imperial structure. To be sure, the fact that in the aftermath of World War II, a number of nations were directly dependent on the United States in matters of security, politics, and economics, created a system that in many respects, including that of scale, superficially resembled the British, Roman, and Chinese empires of the past. The more than 1 million American troops stationed on some 400 major and almost 3,000 minor United States military bases scattered all over the globe. The 42 nations tied to the United States by security pacts. The American military missions training the officers and troops of many other national armies, and the approximately 200,000 United States civilian government employees in foreign posts, all make for striking analogies to the great classical imperial systems. Nevertheless, the concept of imperial shields rather than reveals a relationship between America and the world that is both more complex and more intimate. The imperial aspect of the relationship was, in the first instance, a transitory and rather spontaneous response to the vacuum created by World War II and to the subsequent felt threat from communism. Moreover, it was neither formally structured nor explicitly legitimized. The empire was at most an informal system marked by the pretense of equality and non-interference. This made it easier for the imperial attributes to recede once conditions changed. By the late 1960s, with a few exceptions, the earlier direct political military dependence on the United States had declined, often in spite of political efforts by the United States to maintain it. Its place had been filled by the more pervasive but less tangible influence of American economic presence and innovation as they originated directly from the United States and were stimulated abroad by American foreign investment, the latter annually yielding a product considerably in excess of the gross national product of most major countries. In effect, American influence has a porous and almost invisible quality. It works through the interpenetration of economic institutions, the sympathetic harmony of political leaders and parties, and shared concepts of sophisticated intellectuals, the mating of bureaucratic interests. It is, in other words, something new in the world, and not yet well understood. It is the novelty of America's relationship with the world, complex, intimate, and porous, that the more orthodox, especially Marxist analysis of imperialism failed to encompass. To see that relationship merely as the expression of an imperial drive is to ignore the part played in it by the crucial dimension of the technological scientific revolution. That revolution not only captivates the imagination of mankind, who can fail to be moved by the spectacle of man reaching the moon, but inescapably compels imitation of the most advanced by the less advanced, and stimulates the export of new techniques, methods, and organizational skills from the former to the latter. There is no doubt that this results in an asymmetrical relationship, but the content of that asymmetry must be examined before it is called imperialism. Like every society, America no doubt prefers to be more rather than less advanced. Yet it is also striking that no other country has made so great an effort, governmentally and privately, through business and especially through foundations, to export its know-how, to make public its space findings, to promote new agricultural techniques, to improve educational facilities, to control population growth, to improve healthcare, and so on. All of this has imperial overtones, and yet it is misleading to label it as such. Indeed, unable to understand fully what is happening in their own society, Americans find it difficult to comprehend the global impact that society has had in its unique role as disseminator of the technotronic revolution. This impact is contradictory. It both promotes and undermines American interests as defined by American policymakers. It helps to advance the cause of cooperation on a larger scale, even as it disrupts existing social or economic fabrics. It both lays the groundwork for well-being and stability and enhances the forces working for instability and revolution. Unlike traditional imperialistic powers, which relied heavily on the principle of divide impera, or divide and conquer, practiced with striking similarity by the British in India and more recently by the Russians in Eastern Europe, America has striven to promote regionalism both in Europe and in Latin America. Yet, in so doing, it is helping to create larger entities that are more capable of resisting its influence and of competing with it economically. Implicitly, and often explicitly modeled on the American pattern, modernization makes for potentially greater economic well-being. But in the process, it disrupts existing institutions, undermines prevailing mores, and stimulates resentment that focuses directly on the source of change, America. The result is an acute tension between the kind of global stability and order that America subjectively seeks and the instability, impatience, and frustration that America unconsciously promotes. The United States has emerged as the first global society in history. It is a society increasingly difficult to delineate in terms of its outer cultural and economic boundaries. Moreover, it is unlikely that in the foreseeable future, America will cease to exercise the innovative stimulus that is characteristic of its current relationship with the world. By the end of this century, extrapolating for current trends, only some 13 countries are likely to reach the 1965 level of the per capita gross national product of the United States. Unless there is major scientific and economic stagnation or a political crisis, see Part 4. At the end of the century, America will still be a significant force for global change, whether or not the dominant subjective mood is pro or anti-American.